Welcome everybody. My name's Ollie Pendridge. I'm a resident in Barkham, and also I'm one of the directors at Ovesco, the Ouse Valley Energy Services Cooperative, who are based in Lewes, and have been running since 2007. I joined them in 2009 as a volunteer director, and at the same time when I joined Ovesco, in Barkham, we were having a local plan, and the whole village were questioned, as part of the local plan about the future of the village. And big question that came out of the local plan that the parish council ran was, what about about the environment and about climate change, but also about the high use of oil in the village. And in 2012, I got together with Department of Business and Energy and some local people, and University of Brighton and a few other people like Ovesco from the village. And with the parish council, we ran a local energy plan, and we looked at a whole area review of the parish. And we sent a questionnaire out to all the village on your homes. We learned that there are 4 different housing types in the village, and the village uses over 175% above average energy usage, national average. And we had a very high carbon count as well. Of course, because, we've got a lot of private homes, and they're bigger than normal, they're rural, and we all drive a lot, we go into Lewes back and forth all day. And so there's a reason for that. And during that project, we helped install for free in the village 300 installations of insulation. So it could well be, your house was insulated back in 2012 through that scheme. And over the years, we've held that data. We've done a few heat assessments within the village. And we looked at the school and at Bevan View and a few others. And over the last few years, I'm very lucky. I've been chairing the regional energy strategy, and Phil from Buro Happold, who's on this call with me, who are a global energy agency, we're doing a lot of the technical information on that energy strategy and the main bulk of the work. And I described Barkham to Phil, and we talked about the project and the findings that we'd had in 2012 and how the village had been really engaged. We'd had energy fairs and everything. And Phil and I went together to the Energy Networks Association, where all the country's energy networks were assembled, and we presented this project to them. And in a sense, we said to them, what would happen, because this village is such a wonderful village, if everybody came off oil at one go and went to renewable heating, and if everybody started to transition to electric vehicles as well? What would happen to the grid? And UK Power Network said, that's really interesting. We really liked, what you presented to us. We'd like to do an investigation into that and find out exactly how the village uses their energy. And if everybody did transition to renewable energy and become low carbon and a net zero village, what the impact on the electricity grid would be. And if we could have a planned or an unplanned approach and what those impacts were. So, and here we are today. And we've launched CommuniHeat, and it's very much a project with the village at heart and the local people at heart, and we're assessing all the homes, and today we're here about the project, and it will give you some feel for it. So we've got a number of speakers that I'll introduce, and then we'll hear all about the project, and then we've got a good sort of 25 minutes to ask questions. So please use the chat box at the bottom. As you go along, just write your questions out, and then at the end we can have a discussion and find out your thoughts and capture them. So just you'll hear from, I'll introduce the Ovesco team first. Nikki Myers, who has worked in heat most of her life, over the last 10 years, and is a heat specialist. We've got, and is project managing this project. We've got Chris Rowland, who's the chief exec of Ovesco and one of the founders of Ovesco, and has a great knowledge on how community energy projects operate, and one of the leading practitioners in the country. And Mark Engineer, who's from the village, lives in the village, and is now our newly appointed operations manager, and is responsible for liaising with people on the ground and running our energy champion networks. We've employed energy champions in the village as well. And then from UK Power Networks, we have Ashita Anand, who's the innovation lead and leading the project and our link with UK Power Networks. And from Buro Happold, Philip Proctor, who's a font of knowledge and about the future of heat and energy. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Chris, who can tell us a bit about Ovesco. And just come off mute, Chris. Well done.
Hello, I'm Chris Rowland. I'm from Ovesco, CEO of Ovesco. Ovesco was set up in 2007 by Transition Town Lewis's Energy Group. And one of the first projects that we did was Lewis District Council, which was to run a microgeneration grant scheme and energy advice service. And we did that for about 3 years, giving out grants for people to have things like solar thermal on their homes. And that was very successful. And then we developed a number of community-owned solar projects. And the best known of those was the one where we put solar PV on the roof of Harvey's Brewery at their depot in Lewis. And that was one of the first projects which a community energy group raised a share offer for, so that local people could invest in local generation. And then we went on to raise more money through that share offer, and we installed solar PV at Brickyard Farm and Barkham Nursery. As Ollie said, we then did a local plan for the village of Barkham. That was a LEAF project. And we helped homeowners get insulation and energy efficiency advice. And as I said, put the solar PV on Brickyard Farm, Barkham Nurseries. We even looked at hydro project for Barkham Mills, although we didn't take that forward at the time. And we've helped develop and finance a 5 megawatt solar farm near Chichester for Meadow Blue Community Energy. And we're now partners on CommuniHeat with Buro Happold, UK Power Networks, and Community Energy South as well. Thank you.
So we can have Phil, yeah.
Please.
Phil's going to come off mute, maybe. That's it.
All right. Yes, hi. Sorry, Phil Proctor, Buro Happold. So we're a UK consultancy, although we have global offices. Ollie's given us a good introduction already. That part of what we do is focus on infrastructure solutions that decarbonise. As a bit of background, as Ollie mentioned earlier, we do regional decarbonisation study for the Greater Brighton region as a whole. That included looking at decarbonising, our transport system, using lots of solar PV and wind energy, etc. And then one of the key areas that we identified that would really benefit not only the area but the UK wide is the involvement of community energy schemes and the involvement of communities directly in developing solutions to decarbonise our networks. But also to transition across to new technologies away from fossil fuel technologies as well.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I'll bring up the next slide, which is for Ashita.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashita Anand, and I'm an innovation project lead at the UK Power Networks. You might be aware that the UK Power Networks is a distribution network operator, And our role is basically to own and maintain the electricity grid. Where we come into the picture about net zero and all is we understand that there is this government's legally binding net zero by 2050 target. And UKPN is actually working with some key stakeholders to achieve that goal by focusing on three main areas. The first one is decarbonization of power, and that's by facilitating the connection of renewable distributed generation. The second is decarbonization of transport, so talking about EVs. And then the third is the decarbonization of heat. So the example is the switching from an oil boiler to renewable heating technologies. So CommuniHeat, as you'll learn, actually touches on all three of those aspects, the generation, the transport, and it focuses on heat. And so ultimately that is enabling that net zero transition. The CommuniHeat project itself is funded by the Network Innovation Allowance, and that's meant for innovation projects like CommuniHeat. And one of the main goals of those NIA projects is to lead and develop a process that other networks and communities can follow, which is precisely what we're actually hoping to do with your help on CommuniHeat.
Thank you, Ashita. I'll bring up the next slide and pass over to Mark.
Hi folks, thanks for coming everyone. The challenge, how do we stop using oil and become carbon neutral? And I've been in the village for just over 6 years now, and I've had this conversation with a lot of residents saying we want to get away from oil. We realise that it's not good, but not quite sure how to go about it. It's important to recognise that this isn't just Ovesco or Ovesco and partners coming in and saying, we should do this because we think it's a good thing, although obviously we do think it's a good thing. The government's committed to this, electric heating in rural areas over the next 10 years. There are other implications. It has to be affordable and achievable for everyone. There are obviously implications around electric cars as well, as has been mentioned. No new diesel and petrol vehicles after 2030. That network has to be sort of built up. And we're looking at a planned versus an unplanned approach to zero carbon heating. And what we mean by that, unplanned is just to let everyone do their own thing, take their own initiative, risk the tech, find out about funding, and come over to renewable powered heating. Planned approach is, all of us, Ovesco, Buro Happold, UK Power Network, and the residents of the village having a conversation to find out a way that we can all do it together. We can make it affordable and achievable for everyone. And this will give local ownership of energy production to the village. Obviously, as Ovesco, we're a community energy organisation, and that's very close to our hearts. So it will also give resilience. We face an uncertain future in all sorts of ways, but how our energy is produced is part of it, and owning that in a sense is going to make us more resilient. And it's an opportunity to show leadership. This is the first project of its kind in the UK, and we're hoping to, assuming it's a success, we'll be writing a book which will give guidance to other rural communities wanting to do the same. And there's a lot of appetite for it out there. We're hearing from local rural villages who are also on oil, but also from villages in as far afield as Devon, Herefordshire, Wales. Word is spreading. It's very, very exciting, and I get really excited when I think I could be part of a pioneering project like that, and also doing something as a parent that's going to hopefully secure my children's future and their children's future. So yeah, very, very exciting stuff. Can I have the next slide, please? Given the first part of the project is a data gathering exercise, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment. But with the data gathered, Phil and the guys at Buro Happold will be able to produce a virtual map of the village, and that will enable us to see what the village currently looks like in terms of its energy use, and you know, what the scenarios are, what the possibilities are for transitioning to zero carbon. It will also, you know, lead us to get an understanding of the impacts of the planned versus the unplanned approach on the grid. And Ashita will speak to that a little more in a while, but that's obviously need to know what infrastructure changes are needed for electrification. And defining the best way forward for all, and that's really, really important. This is not about anybody telling anybody what to do or imposing anything on anyone. It's having a conversation amongst us all the organisations involved in CommuniHeat and the village, and working out a way that everyone can buy into. There'll be the opportunity for residents to sit on steering committees and so forth. You really can, you know, we want to hear your ideas, we want to hear your input. We want it to be an ongoing conversation. Could I have the next slide, please? So just a little more of the detail. We've recruited some local energy champions. These are the guys who are going to be out there doing surveys on, we're aiming for 200 houses to have energy use surveys. 50 of those homes we're also looking to install non-invasive energy monitoring equipment. So non-invasive, again, very important. These devices have been selected partly with that in mind. So we won't be drilling or cutting into anything. They attach themselves to pipes on your boiler, on your heating, hot water tank, up to wires, and are sort of stuck onto walls. So you won't be falling over them. They're small, they're non-intrusive. We'll be giving out vouchers to say thank you, which you'll be able to spend at local businesses. So obviously a nice incentive there for the local business community as well. Hopefully you're getting an overview of it, but obviously we're always available to answer questions. You can email our CommuniHeat email. You can call us, or if you see me out and about in the village, I'm very happy if you want to stop me for a chat. I'm having conversations with friends and residents about this all the time, and yeah, you know, I'm dead excited about it. So I really don't mind being stopped and asked questions. Can we have the next slide, please? So what we've done so far, we've had over 80 residents contact us saying they'd like to take part. It's growing all the time. I would think it's probably, that figure is probably up to 90 by now. We've installed 10 monitoring devices in homes already. We're on track to install 30 more in the coming weeks. Our energy champions are out and about doing that right now. We've built a website which is now live, and I would urge you to visit if you haven't already. There's some good stuff on there, a lot of frequently asked questions and good information. We're also going to be offering bill checking services. This is something Ovesco has traditionally done, and it's available to all residents in the village. You don't have to be taking part in CommuniHeat. It's an incentive we want to give back to the village, and it's a great opportunity for residents to find out how to manage their energy bills, how to become more energy efficient, become greener and save money. And we've been on the BBC News, which some of you might well have seen, but if you haven't, we have a clip for you. So I'll let you hear from the wonderful Tim Bullen. Tim's obviously lost his voice. Okay, not sure what happened there.
Sorry about that. We thought we'd solved that problem, but obviously we haven't. So apologies. But what I'll do, I'll put the clip, or if somebody could, no, I'll put the clip in the chat so you can click on that and see the whole thing. So apologies for that. Phil, the next slide is for you, so we'll pass over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, so just to give a bit more background to what we're doing and why we're doing it. So currently, if anybody in the village wanted to come off oil and put a heat pump in their home, for example, they could speak to a supplier, get a home survey, and get a heat pump put into the home, or indeed if you wanted an electric vehicle, you can get an electric vehicle charging point fitted to your home, and off you go. And the market is out there to do that, and there is government funding, which we can explain later if you're not aware of that, available to do that. But as was mentioned earlier, what we want to explore is what happens if everybody tries to do that, particularly in a rural community where traditionally you're on a weaker part of the electricity network as compared to, say, an urban network. Would that cause problems? And in many cases, we think it will. And what we want to do is explore, well, what are the benefits of working directly with the community to look at a community planned approach that could enable everybody to transition, could help the network operator, in this case UKPN, to transition with you and to understand how to plan their network to allow that to happen, but also to look at other benefits that providing that approach would deliver. So, for example, choices that perhaps you wouldn't have if you made them on an individual household basis, but as a community you would have choices that would include, say, for example, different commercial models for funding these things, for getting a lower cost of energy, for putting in some more local renewable energy that could be community owned, to change the way that heat's delivered. So rather than having your own individual heat pumps, it might be feasible to put heat network in, for example, and then lower the cost of heat and have a different solution. One of the things that we're also doing, and the reason for the mention of the data platforms in homes, is that homes are all very different, and particularly in a village like Barkham, which is atypical of villages around the UK, you have a whole range of different types of houses, different ages, etc. Some solutions may be feasible in some houses and not in others. There may be, different levels of cost required depending on the house you're in to make some of these technologies work. So what we'll do is we appraise your building, appraise the types of building in the village, the types of solutions that could be applied, the cost of those solutions in conjunction with the network cost, and we look at what's the best solution in the round for the community to reduce that cost and deliver the heat that's needed through our process. Next slide, I think. So just an example of some very initial analysis we did right at the outset when we were looking at this. One of the trigger points actually was the church. And I actually walked around the village with Ollie and Chris, and we looked at and we talked to a couple of members of the community, because the bill of the church is very high, the energy bill. And we said, well, let's look at this as a mini project. So we looked at the church and we looked at some land next to the church, which the church now has access to. What happens if we put some PV panels on there? What happens if we put some heat pumps in the ground as well? Let's model that and let's look at how much energy we could leverage from that, and let's look at how we can reduce the bill for the church and deliver heat and power to not only maybe the church, but also potentially the cluster of homes next to the church as well, as a mini energy system. And that threw up some interesting numbers. And then we thought, well, what can we do if we took that approach and then did it across the village? So we're looking at not only the heat requirement and the power demand for the homes, but also how you can make energy locally as well, and how you could integrate that all together.
Thanks, Phil. That's brilliant. Can I pass over to Ashita now? So I'll pass on to the next slide.
Yeah, so of course we've been talking about off-gas grids and rural communities, and while there are very many rural communities and off-gas grid communities within the UK Power Networks patch, there is that bigger picture that we're looking at as well. We know that there are roughly 4 million homes off the gas grid in the UK, and our hope is, with the project that we're doing here today, we'd be able to replicate that for all of those homes. And when we take a look at that 4 million number, that the number of off-gas grid customers, the government has expressed that electricity is the most likely way forward for those homes to decarbonize. And as you can imagine, that is something that, of course, the networks have to be ready for. So we have to understand, and we need to understand that impact on our network to ensure that we can enable that transition, because we don't want to be the holdup in that process. What is particularly useful for us to see is actually that change in impact from that planned approach versus that unplanned approach. And as you can imagine, that has the direct network reinforcement implications. So we're going to work with Buro Happold to build that power model and understand what that impact would look like. And beyond that, we want to understand what the actual barriers are to decarbonization. We're looking to identify what those barriers are so that we can actually help remove some of them, hopefully, so that communities like Barkham can smoothly transition towards net zero.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So I'll just quickly go over what will happen in the village, which is not very much. We're not going to be digging up the roads for this project. You won't see lots of vans or lots of people around. All we're asking is that we have 200 households who come forward who allow us to survey their houses, and 50 of those houses to have monitoring equipment in. And we ask you to keep up to date with the project, to get involved, to speak to us about it, to come to our webinars, to see our website, which is now live, and basically, you know, talk about the project and be in contact about it. Just a quick timeline here, quite a lot of which we've talked about already. So the monitors are being fitted into houses this month. And that will be 50 of them. We launched the website at the end of December, so that's live, and that's a really good place to find information, and also to keep an eye on, because we'll be updating the website all the time. The surveys we'll be doing from this month probably until around June. We'll then be passing all the data over to Buro Happold, and they'll start to put it into their modelling software, and they'll work on that throughout the summer. We'll continue to have these webinars and hopefully live events as soon as we possibly can, to talk to you about the project and to have that interaction. And then in September, we're hoping to start to feedback the results of the modelling and start that discussion. So now I'll pass over to Ollie for the final bit.
Thanks very much, Nikki, and everybody for your contributions. So I get the enviable task of just summing up and just putting things into perspective. So Nikki's just gone through the timeline. So basically at this stage of the project, what we're doing is, just to remind you, we're looking for homes where we can do heat assessments. And we'll come back afterwards and give you that information and recommendations for you, which will be independent, you know, what the options you've got, but it also give you the data of how your house is heated, and other ideas. And then we'll take that all together during the summer and work with UKPN and Buro Happold and put together a plan for the village, an informed plan. We'll come back and share that with you in the autumn, late summer. So these pictures I always think are interesting. They're from the history of the village. Obviously Barkham Mills was originally, you know, industry powered by water, quite amazing. And then obviously there was a railway at one time through Barkham, and obviously those trains would have been powered by coal. And there's the high street in the 1800s with no cars at all in it, a horse and cart at the end by the roundabouts. So just in summary, you know, the history of energy changes, and we are in a moment of real change at the moment. Climate change isn't something that's going to happen, it is happening. And I had a discussion earlier around this project and around the future of heating and cooling, you know, and someone said to me, in your house, how is it? Does it get hot in summer? And then I thought about it, I thought, yeah, the last few summers, you know, my kids have come downstairs to sleep. They might have slept in the garden on a few very hot days. It wouldn't surprise us in 10 or 15 years' time if we're not talking about cooling in homes. So, the history of energy is changing. And oil, we would have had oil boilers installed probably in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Our electricity system was first built, I don't know, in the 40s. It was reinforced over the years. There was a big electricity system rollout in the 70s. So, over the years, it's been reinforced and it's changing. And now what's going to happen, if we go on to the next slide. Thank you. Now what's going to happen is that, energy is going to change again. And with COVID and everything, people are very aware of climate change, and oil heating is going to be phased out by the governments. They have committed to that. And it's something that we need to plan for over the next 10 years. And this project is all about that, but doing it as a community. And Ovesco is one of the leading community energy companies in England. Back in 2009, when I worked for them, people were phoning up from all around the world asking Ovesco, how do we be a community energy company? And that's gone on. So, it's all about behavior change and the way we see things, but also doing it together. And we can make it really efficient if we do it together. We've got over 600 homes in Barkham that have oil, we believe, at the moment. And who knows, after this project, we can help over the next 10 years people transition off oil and do it together. And there will be savings in doing that. So without further ado, I will just go on to this slide here, just to let you know, Transition Town Lewes are running really interesting webinars during February on heating, insulation and power. And they're really good practical sessions. And Ovesco is part of Transition Town Lewes, has been involved with them. So to do that, and do contact us if you want us to check your energy bills or give you independent advice. The core team at Ovesco are trained up by a government scheme called the Big Energy Saving Network, where we are independent energy bill advisors. We can just give your energy bill a health check. And we had somebody on earlier that was having a problem with their boiler or heat pump. And so we can have a look at that. So do contact us, anything energy related, and we'll see if we can help. So without further ado, Nikki, are there any questions in the chat box?
There was a really interesting one from Judith Harwood, who was asking about whether electricity can be truly carbon neutral. Do you want to talk a bit about your question, Judith?
Yes, I mean, I imagine that electricity is generated using some form of not entirely carbon neutral source. I know that battery storage is one of the things that's being talked about. But it does seem to me that if you're going to have all the cars and, electric cars and electric heating, that's going to require quite a lot of electricity, which must come from somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Judith, to begin with, the carbon intensity of our electricity grid is going down every year because, as a country, we're transitioning to renewable energy. So, there's a lot more offshore wind and, we're coming off coal-fired powered stations. So the actual carbon intensity of the grid is reducing, which is great. And Phil or Shita, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I can definitely comment on the UKPN side. I think that's a very valid question, Judith, and I think this is something that's definitely top of mind for power engineers and like myself, and I'm sure Phil can weigh in on that too. But it is, as Ollie said, the carbon intensity has been falling, and I think it's since like 2012. If you compare now versus then, I think there's like a 40% less carbon going into the atmosphere than it was 8-9 years ago. And so that number is coming down. And so we are seeing that change happen. And from the UKPN side, as I mentioned earlier, we do have the three-pronged approach. The first one also looking at the decarbonization of power generation, so that whenever we're getting power from these sources, it's from clean sources. We're getting it from solar and wind and that type of stuff. So that's actually helping the electricity sector become more moving towards that carbon neutral phase.
Could I just have a further question? Because in this village, I would say there are quite a lot of wood burning stoves. And I don't think wood burning stoves can be regarded as totally carbon neutral.
I haven't got one of my sustainability team with me on the call, but generally speaking, it all depends on the source of the wood in summary. So if you can get a sustainable source of wood in a wood burning stove, then effectively you consider it a sustainable source.
But it's producing, I mean, the actual smoke that comes from it. I mean, the burning of wood is not carbon neutral. Whatever. Well,
it's the combustion. So you have to split carbon from emissions because the wood burning stove produces emissions, which is why the latest regs mean that the new stoves have got a lot lower emission output. But the basic science is that the trees are taking the carbon out of the atmosphere in the first place. So, and then you're putting it back into the atmosphere. So from a rounded perspective, it's carbon neutral. But obviously that has to take into account what are you doing to process it and how far are you transporting the wood to get it to the point, which is why the sustainable source of wood is key to that picture.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're very lucky in the village to have local wood sources, and I do believe there are requirements now for drying wood properly, correctly, and that's important. And also, obviously, kerosene heating is a high pollutant. So, yeah. Are there any other questions? Interesting to hear we've got somebody from Devon on the call.
Hello.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve here. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello, Steve.
Hello. Yes, very interested indeed in what you're doing. Just like to share with you very briefly this EU bid we've put through the Green Deal through Europe. It's really what you're doing on a much larger scale. We're talking about hubs, if you like, or living labs across Europe. We're one of them here in rural Devon. We're actually twinned up with a couple across the UK, one in Wales, Carmarthen Energy Local, and a very suburban area of Birmingham as well. And here in Devon, we're actually extending beyond our village and encompassing the district council area of 80,000 people. And the aim really is I think, similarly to do the kind of thing you're doing on a much bigger scale and taking a more systems approach as well. So we'll be looking at things like farming, food production, tourism, travel, you know, the endless list, fuel poverty, etc., etc. We're being led by a university in Holland, the University of Twente, and we've got 26 partners across Europe. And our other hubs, if you like, will be based in Spain, obviously the Netherlands and Romania. I'm very happy to share. It's a massive, great bid, but I'm very happy to share it. I can email it to people. You can see all the details. But really, Ovesco, is it? The
Ovesco.
Ovesco, I beg your pardon. Yeah, I mean, I think in a way we wish we knew a bit more about you when we were doing this bid with our colleagues across Europe. But clearly there's a lot of synergy here, and I'd be very happy to share what we're up to, and maybe you could share what you're doing as well, if that helps.
Of course. Well, the email's now on the screen. Steve, send us an email.
Yes, I will.
And we'd love to hear from you. And also, by the time I understand your scheme gets up and running in June, by the time
if we get the funding, of course, as you know what these things are like. You could spend a long time putting them together and waiting a long time to get results. We're very keen. We've got a very active group in our village, and it seems very, very similar to Barkham, for example.
Excellent. Well,
we're trying to do what we can.
We are members of Community Energy England, so we share everything we do across all the other 270 community energy groups across England and the UK. So do be in touch and
certainly will
send us information.
Yeah,
thanks, Steve.
Thanks very much.
Are there any other questions? I'll just check the time. Okay, well, so if there aren't any other questions, I will wrap up and thank the team. So we did a session beforehand between 6:30 and 7:30, which we had a good sort of 25 people attending. And we thank you all for coming at this late time in the evening. Please do email us if you would like to take part and first of all have a heat assessment in your home, or if you have any questions, or if you'd like your energy bills checked or any advice on energy, do keep in contact and look out for us. We'll keep on putting information in the parish news and update you as we go along. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody, for coming.